Hey everyone, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com, and today we're looking at the MSI MPG Z490 Gaming Carbon Wi-Fi. Bit of a mouthful. Let's do this.
Behold mortals, wield the power of the gods with the MSI Z490 Gaming. With 1690 amp phases for incredible overclocking capabilities. And featuring dual Thunderbolt 3 ports, 10 GBE LAN with Wi-Fi 6 and a PCIe Gen 4 expander card, you can achieve true enlightenment with the MSI Z490 Gaming.
So before I kind of get started with this, I do have to say this, and every other video of Z490 I've had to say this as well. We do have benchmarks, we do have overclocking, we have all that good stuff, but we are actually filming this before we do all the testing. So we're just going to kind of plonk it in at the end. So definitely stay around until the end of the video where you'll be able to see all that good stuff. But moving on to the board itself, this is the MPG Z490 Gaming Carbon Wi-Fi. I mean, it's a pretty long name, but the beauty of kind of the carbon stuff is that generally speaking, you get the latest and greatest features. You get a really nice design for not really too much money. Now, when we're talking about money, we are looking at $269.99 in the US and £259.99 in the UK. Now, this is a little bit higher than what the Z390 version of this board actually launched for. That pretty much was about $220, so it was a little bit cheaper. But in theory, you should be getting a lot more from this, like Type-C Gen 2, you should be getting the Wi-Fi 6 AX. So before we get into kind of the features, let's talk about the design of the actual board. So the board itself, I've got to admit, with the Gaming Carbon kind of series, they do generally look quite premium. They kind of go for, I guess, a plain aesthetic, which allows you to kind of spice things up a little bit with any other hardware that may be in your system. Everything is black and grey, and of course, there is some carbon on there. I've never really been a massive fan of carbon fibre, but MSI seem to use pretty decent quality sort of carbon wrapping and things like that. So it does still kind of look premium and not bordering on that kind of tacky look that you get, you know, when teenagers try and do up their car and they fit carbon fibre and you can just tell it looks cheap and tacky. I mean, if you do want to spice things up a little bit more, there is some lighting on the board. So to start with, there is lighting on the kind of rear I/O area. There is also lighting around the chipset. So not a huge amount, but if you want to sort of add more to that, then there is a 4-pin connector. Sadly, there is only actually one of them, but there is two 3-pin addressable RGB headers and also a Corsair connector. I'm not quite sure, maybe MSI have got something going on with Corsair, but they always seem to include this on their boards. Now around the CPU socket, it is quite plentiful, so there is kind of a lot of power phases going on. It's actually got a 12+1+1 power phase design, but it still looks pretty spacious. You're not going to have any problem with clearance issues when it comes to large coolers, and there's still going to be, you know, plenty of ventilation around the CPU socket area. Now to power the phases on this, there is a 8-pin and a 4-pin connector. There's no kind of shielding on there, which personally I would have liked to have seen. I don't think it's going to add too much in terms of the cost, but they decided to not go with that on the EPS power connectors. Now in terms of keeping everything nice and cool, we have got this kind of smaller heatsink at the top and then a larger one down the side. That's going to keep things, you know, nice and cool even when you're overclocking. In terms of sort of extra cooling, we have got the M.2 shield frozers on both M.2 slots, as well as a kind of heatsink over the PCH chipset. In terms of memory support, we're looking at up to 128 gig of 4800 megahertz plus. Never really understood the whole plus thing, but apparently you can push it above and beyond that. Technically, even when you're at 4800 megahertz, you are kind of overclocking, I guess, even when you're using XMP. For all your storage needs, there are 6 Sata ports. This is pretty much a trend across all of the Z490 boards that we've looked at, and we have got videos on many, many more, so go and check them out on our YouTube channel. Other storage, as I mentioned earlier, there are 2 M.2 slots, and it is worth noting that all MSI boards, and I'm talking all of them, every single one, has PCI Express 4.0 capabilities. So when Rocket Lake, which apparently is what it's going to be called, comes out in the, I guess, near future, I'm hoping sometime later this year, which should in theory have PCI Express 4.0 capabilities, this board is ready to rock and roll. In terms of expansion slots on here, we have got 3 X16 slots, and the top 2 do have the armor shielding on there. I wish that they kind of put that on, you know, the memory and the EPS connectors at top, but you know, it's not a deal breaker. If you are going to be running, I guess, multiple graphics cards and things like that, things are going to change ever so slightly with the speeds. So instead of running sort of X16 across all of them, you're actually going to be restricted to X16, 0 and X4, or X8, X8, X4. You will also find that there are some X1 slots on here as well. And again, it's worth noting that these are fully PCI Express 4.0 compliant. So when that Rocket Lake CPU kind of range hits, like I say, this board's going to be ready to rock and roll. For things like USB, we have a Gen 2, 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C connector. We have 3.2 Gen 1. We have USB 2.0. One thing that I maybe would have liked to have seen is a debug LED. On a board of kind of this price point, I don't know, maybe would have expected it, just for kind of troubleshooting and overclocking, especially the fact that we have, you know, the extra power delivery. It's just a bit weird not having a debug LED. Wouldn't you agree? Another added feature that it has got though for that price point is a Thunderbolt header. So if you were going to be using an expansion card that has Thunderbolt, it can simply plug into the board and away you go. Audio wise, it hasn't really got anything special, I guess. It's got the Chemicon kind of Japanese capacitors, premium capacitors as they call it, but it is just a Realtek ALC 1220 chipset. So nothing kind of too out of the ordinary, but it does exactly what it's set out to do. You know, for the most part, people aren't going to be running this with sort of high-grade premium bookshelf speakers or, you know, extreme quality headphones, but still it's going to sound amazing and crystal clear. And lastly, looking at the rear I/O, there's I guess one weird thing on here. For a board of kind of this price, it has got a PS2 keyboard mouse combo port, which is a little bit strange. It has got HDMI and DisplayPort for iGPU capabilities. It's got Type-C on there. It's got USB 3.2 Gen 2, Gen 1, USB 2.0, everything that you'd expect. It has got the Wi-Fi 6 AX that we're kind of seeing on pretty much all of the boards, apart from one, I believe, which is a Tomahawk that we've got a video on. But yeah, Wi-Fi 6 AX. And then, of course, we have our HD audio connectors and our optical SP diff. It's also worth noting that it does have 2.5G on here. Basically, as far as I know, all of the MSI boards in the Z490 range have that, with thanks to the Realtek RTL 8125B chipset. So there you go. That's kind of where I have to, for me, to end this video, because we are, as I mentioned, going to be putting in the overclocks and the benchmarks and everything after I kind of wrap things up. So yeah, let me know what you think of kind of the design, the features. Is it worth the money, or is there another board that's maybe caught your eye on the Z490 kind of series range of motherboards? Yeah, well, enjoy the benchmarks, enjoy the overclocking, and I guess I will see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.